That was around
5:04. And sorry, I'm going with the packet. Modifications, additions to the agenda. I know besides the one, we're gonna move action item A to the beginning of the meeting for time. Is there anything else that we need from staff?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, should we do public comment first, or do we need to do that action item
We
first?
get the action item.
Okay,
That would be great.
okay, so we're gonna start with action item A, which is approve resolution 2022-20.
Oh, sorry, that's wrong. 20. Yeah, no, that's correct. Sorry.
2022-23-2, authorizing bank account signatories.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Member Hibben?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? All opposed? Okay, Chair, I pass. Do you need Heather's signature on this? She'll be here in
No,
a couple
three,
minutes.
it passes with a quorum.
Okay. There you go. Okay, thank you very much, Genevieve. And then any public comment? Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Nope.
Number is online.
Nope.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion for the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented to us tonight.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, chair aye. Okay, informational reports, bridge replacement project. Any questions there for Kevin or Shannon or Michael, sorry, is he online?
I don't think we have
I didn't see
anybody.
it.
Okay,
I think we ought to at least mention what happened on the 14th.
Sure, absolutely.
One or two, how many Oregon, how many?
Yeah, it was
Washington?
pretty impressive showing. We had 17 Washington legislators and I think 15 or 16 Oregon legislators. So I was talking with Jeff Helfrich, and he said that he had never seen such a large number of bi-state representation from the state legislators. So so very impressive. Christy, thank you very much for all you
Yeah.
did.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if it could have come off so smoothly if it wasn't for your maintenance of that entire effort. I mean, it was really, really impressive. And so thank you for.
no problem.
I'm going to jump in. I think I agree with you totally. You did a magnificent job. Marla was outstanding at the, there was a public panel. Mayor of
Wait, Sam.
White Salmon. Mike did a nice job in the front end of the meeting, giving a nice briefing on the old and the new bridge. And there's some slides there that some of us can use for future discussions. It was really, really a professional looking discussion that,
Well, and I really want to give props to Mayor Keithler, the way that she handled the panel. It transitioned from each speaker so effortlessly. I don't know how she did it, but it just, the whole afternoon flowed and it was really great. So awesome props to Washington side.
and going back, Mike's here now. Is there anything you want to bring up out of your report?
No, Geotech is getting ready to start. They were out here actually today, kind of eyeing up the site. So there will be a work plan kickoff meeting once they get going, to coordinate everything, because it will impact the parking and some other things when we go out and start doing the boring. So, but, you know, that's gonna be the first sign of work here that we'll get started up quickly. So,
And then the other thing, Kevin, is we've been meeting with legislators, Zoom calls.
Ones.
How many have we done?
Oh, I want to say on the Oregon side, we've probably done 9, I want to say, and then we've got more coming up next week as well.
Yeah, we got 2 or 3 next week.
Yeah. And we'll just keep doing that.
Now, does
By 2 to
Washington
3.
do that too?
Mhm.
They will, Brad wanted to wait until after the 14th, because that was a great way to familiarize a lot of the legislators.
Yeah.
With the project, and so we'll start ramping up, but that will be primarily the Washington members of the bi-state working group and one or two Oregon members participating.
One of the things that we showed them in the meeting was a very short clip of a truck going across the bridge. And there's the
No.
driver, and I think it was his
So
wife
funny.
is the passenger
Yeah.
in a semi. And the
They clip it.
construction language that they used was amazing.
Well, Genevieve edited that thing perfectly because it was like the last word and then you kind of laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was cracking up.
Yeah.
It was colorful.
Very colorful, yeah.
Tiptoe around.
Yes, but it was perfect. So that was great.
Yeah, and just the panel, all the panelists did a great job. Marla called every one of them and just kind of coached them on how the whole thing was gonna kind of go down. And so, like you said, Commissioner, she just really did a good job of coaching them. And so, I think I did get some requests to try to do, so I don't know if it's even possible, but to try to do smaller version of that during session in Salem.
I think it's a great idea. We ought to do that.
That's something that maybe as part of Gorgeous Nights, we try to, figure out a way to do a portion of that and just another reason to bring legislators to learn more about the project.
Well, I think that one set the bar.
Yeah, it really did. Well, we kind of learned from the federal field rep one that we did during the summer, so. Pretty impressive all the way around.
Yeah, I think that it would be really good to reutilize those storyboards for Gorgeous Nights. And then also if we could get the Story Gorge video company to make another video, maybe ask each of those same panelists, because they were very eloquent in what they said, and piece together maybe a little tiny video that we could show with these local people.
Yeah, it's funny that barge video actually looked too polished.
Yeah.
We got like some really great drone footage of the barge going under the bridge, but it made the bridge look spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't look like it needed to be replaced at all. It was iconic. So we fast forwarded through that one, but
Okay. But other than that, Mike, anything else on the bridge replacement?
No, I mean, we've got the amendment one and just getting ready to get started with preliminary engineering and get things moving. So I think I said at the bi-state working group, we're officially started to spend the $503 million. So
Here we go.
Commissioners, if I could jump in, Jerry asked me just to let you all know that the, under Mike's report for the Bridge Authority process or progress, the attorneys are still looking at the commission formation agreement. I believe that after the report was submitted, Jerry's provided comments to the second draft. I think that Bill Oley is right now looking at second drafts and is in the process of providing comments to that. And also Fred Cowell had some interesting things. So we haven't had a chance to look at the primary place of business report that Steve put together, or the other one was the local government nominations and appointments. And there's a little bit of some concerns about the funding piece and some policy stuff, which you had mentioned that there might be some concerns about that. We're going to be working on a memo to present to you all at the November 1st meeting.
Great.
So I think unless there's anything more for Mike, we can transition into the Mark Libby
Yes.
presentation.
do we need to make one comment on the CFA coming out of last night's meeting? There was an agreement that we're going to have a couple of community events to get some input on the section regarding nominations of board members.
And which side,
and location.
location?
Yeah, and the location where it should go. We kind of had a discussion that kind of leaned towards financially, it's probably wiser to put it in Oregon politically, it may be wiser to go on the other side. But that's when we decided to say, hey, let's go talk to both sides. And get their input on it. And we're planning on doing that in the next couple of weeks.
Kevin, before we go into Mark Libby's, it looks like we do have, if it's okay with everyone, we do have one public comment that showed up a little late, and I'd like to give him the opportunity.
My kids have been late for the bike camp down at Post Canyon. I'm not exactly sure how the process works, so I have a statement from a number of families that regarding turf field over here. So,
Can you just state your name and address?
yep,
for the
I'm Lance
record?
Larrabee. I live at 2120 Highway 35, just before the Gorge White House on the right side. Have two little kids that play soccer, lacrosse, ski here, all kinds of stuff. We're active members of the community. My wife's on the cat board. She does all kinds of things here as well. And the statement I have is really just around the field over here and our ability or lack of ability to use it. So I represent the parents in the community looking for a 2 to 3 year lease option because of pending bridge construction. You know what's going on. I actually came out here in '85, the first time to go windsurfing, same bridge, and it's still scary to drive across it. So I'm really glad to hear that this is moving along. To transform the Marina Green Field into a turf field, we actually have the turf into turf field used by many user groups with priority scheduling within reason for vested parties that are willing to provide turf and installation of the field. We see this fulfilling a community need for furthermore reduce the current maintenance, no water, so don't deal with that. Doesn't get damaged, doesn't get destroyed, and be used by a bunch of people all year long for various sports. So minimizing watering, and we're associated with the area. OUFC Soccer Club plans to, beyond the upcoming agenda, to further present the concept. So OUFC, Oregon United Football Club, my kids are both on it. It's a nice soccer program here, but it's really, the idea is to have the turf fields so that we can use them all the time. And I remember as a coach, lacrosse coach, soccer coach, we were trying to schedule stuff and use stuff here, and we can never use it because it's too muddy, not muddy enough. There's always some reason why we can't use it. And like, come on, this giant green area, let's use something. We actually have the turf right now. And I'm just speaking on behalf of about, I don't know, 100 people or so that said, hey, we need to make a public comment. Here's part of the process, and I'm learning the process. So I don't know if there's anything else I need to do, or questions, or I think I just make the comment, right? Okay. Kids in the car, I gotta go feed them now, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you for that. And then now we'll go to Mark Libby for his presentation.
Great, yep, Mark has been the port's engineer on the review of the fracture critical reports, and probably knows this bridge better than most, if not, he might be the premier person about the condition of this current bridge. I think I had maybe worked for the port for about 2 weeks before I got a hold of these historic plans from, I think there's 2 sets, one from the 1920s and another set from the 1930s.
And then many more.
And many more afterwards. So I'll hand that off to you, Mark, for your presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, commissioners. So I wanted to cover 2 things with you this evening. Update on the supplemental load rating project, and then also the miscellaneous repairs and response to the recent bridge inspection. So we had a couple of joints in the bottom chord of span 3 that was going to need to be strengthened. Everything else was basically checking out from the load testing and the revised analysis that we did on it. Last week, we finally got the photos that we had asked the inspection team for of those specific joints on span 3. And lo and behold, there are splice plates on the joint. They're not in the plans. That makes all the difference in the world in that those now check out. So we want to get an inspection team out there to properly document them and verify thickness and stuff. We just assumed they were same thickness as on other. If you don't know, there's a few, as Kevin mentioned, 1924, basically span 4 through 13. Those were the original trusses. 1 through 3 and then 14 through 19 were added for the reconstruction, when Bonneville was put in. And so they're different designs, slightly. Span 4 plans had splice plates on these joints. And we accounted for those in the analysis and they checked out okay. Span 3 did not, and so anyway, it was coming up deficient. So now we believe that all checks, and that's, this is draft because we want to verify the size of the plate. I emailed back to inspection to, can you confirm this is span 3? Because, they're not in the plan, so that's good news. And so otherwise, all of the rating factors are above 1, except for the EV3 truck. And so rating factor is, it's basically the live load capacity divided by the live load demand. So if it's greater than 1, it's good. Less than 1, not so good. So, and we weren't targeting to do strengthening for the EV3 truck. So it's not really in your client base. It's kind of an extreme load. And so we set out with that sort of intention to not go to that level. And so all the other legal trucks are above 1. And so now we have to redo some stuff because that was new information that we just got, but that's good news. And so that takes care of some strengthening design and construction work on a couple of the gusset plate joints. So any questions on that before I
Yeah,
move
so Mark,
on?
you found a couple plates that you didn't know was there.
Mhm.
What's your confidence about the rest of the structure of being exactly what you expect it to be and not less than what you expect it to be? I don't think there's any real as-built on that thing.
No, not really. This is the kind of bridge where it's hard to kind of verify everything because of its size and access, so it's not an easy one to kind of verify the size of every member. So the confidence, everything's 100% as shown in plans, low. Confidence that it's generally reflected by what's in the plans is pretty high. And don't have any.
So would you recommend, based on what you see now, that we were able to raise the load limit back up? Again, ODOT's got to review it and agree to it, but do you believe that that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts of that, right? So one on the technical side, yes, this would put it back to where the load posting that you had before the new load rating would be back in place, with the exception of this EV3 truck. It would still have, you didn't have any posting for the EV2 or 3 trucks until the notice you got last November, I think it was, about those. So that was a new ad. Prior to that, it was the other legal trucks that your sign covered. And so now that would go back up. So like the 40-ton trucks would be back to 40 tons.
So where I'm going with all this, Mark, is that it's gonna take us a while to get a new bridge built. And we're working our butts off trying to get it and expedite it. I'm concerned, can we make this bridge viable for the next 8 to 9 years without having to turn right back around and derate it again in the next couple of years? Can we, in your engineering opinion, without spending gobs of money, are we going to be able to keep this bridge up and open for the next 8 years?
Yeah, I believe so. So the issue of should you, when it comes to raising the loads back up, that's a policy question as to whether certainly you can. I would say, these ratings are still somewhat conservative. They're not nearly as conservative as design loads. use higher factors and other things, just larger safety margins, right? But there's still a fair amount of safety margin in these
How do
analysis.
you relate that to the ODOT sufficiency rating now sitting at 6? I mean,
The,
publicly,
yeah,
it's kind of questionable.
There's
Why didn't
a-
We go back up on weight when the rating dropped greater than 50%.
yeah. It's a hard one to explain to the, to the public, but the sufficiency rating is tied to the inventory rating on the bridge, and the inventory rating is for the design truck, the design load, which is much higher than this. So the top line on the chart under there is the HL 93 truck. Now, there's no numbers across from that.
I don't know where you're looking at.
Oh, which is the laser pointer. Okay, so right here, I don't know if you can zoom in on it so they can actually read it, but so it says HL 93 inventory, the live load factor 1.75. And then these are the other trucks and they're 1.3. 3 rating factors, basically. That if we had a rating factor listed here for that one, it would be 0.3 something. It's that much lower than these other trucks we're looking at. It's in the ODOT rating, I think it was in the 0.3s. With our live load test applied, it might get to 0.4 or something. Right?
But it's
Which-
still not good.
Which is way below 1, right? So that's the difference. So the sufficiency rating is comparing a bridge to what the current design criteria is for a highway bridge. Shoulder widths, the access alignments,
Right.
full-on load that it can take forever. A 100-year-old bridge will never meet that criteria. So, and it's hard to explain, well, how can a 6, if you're down to a 6? It's kind of like, you remember the Selwood Bridge, it was down to a 2.
Right.
And it's like, well, how can you have a bridge? Oh, it was still running everything. It's just they had limited trucks. For cars, I mean, the bridge doesn't even see
I'm
the
not worried
car.
about the cars. I'm
It's-
worried about trucks.
It's the heavy trucks, right?
Well, heavy trucks now. But what's the next step that's likely to happen is it's probably to ban all the trucks off of it before you stop traffic going across it. Right, your light trucks and your cars. That bridge will hold it up until it totally falls over. But I would think the next step in its life cycle, if it was out there long enough, is to start reducing or banning trucks total. We know there's trucks going across that bridge right now that are overweight. There's no way we can
And there has
stop them
been for a
to
long
really
time.
police it, but if you count bins. And you know each bin is 1,200 pounds. It doesn't take a lot of mental math to figure out you're over the limit.
Yeah.
So that's my concern. I'm torn, because of the narrowness of the bridge. And what we're seeing on the grading and extra willing on the grading. When we reduce the weight and we slowed the traffic down,
Mhm.
we saw an improvement in the amount of grading we had to weld. And if that's the case, it's gotta be supporting, down through the structure itself. On the various joints and so on, that stress has gotta be less going down through there with the load.
Good. Yeah, it is. And that's all of the components, everything is a function of, higher loads have, increased wear. But on a steel truss, for the most part, as long as you are not losing section on the steel or losing connectivity of the elements, you're not losing strength. And so the bigger, the concern is we're deferring a fair amount of maintenance out of ways in the 30-year plan with, there's a number of big projects we've pushed out of ways. Waiting to, a few more years, it's like, is the replacement a go? And can we lock it in? And if not, and Kevin, I know we'll be probably talking about this soon, we'll start reviewing last year's plan on that. We put a band in there to say, here's the window when the decision should be, or an NTP.
Are we gonna be talking about that tonight? Or no?
I wasn't planning
For
to,
the actual.
This is the question I had for you on that. You came out with a new projection about 90 some odd $1 million
Yeah,
over a period of time. Are those numbers escalated?
they have not been adjusted for what's gone on the last 2 years.
So
Year or
that
so.
thing could be significant.
So there's everything's kind of really shot up and we haven't made adjustments to that. Some of the numbers are pretty much just a wag for certain items in there. Other ones were based off of a rough order magnitude cost estimate, which have been adjusted a little bit over the years, but they haven't been redone for. I mean, at this point, we're not even quite sure what the change of the baseline of costs are yet. Because it's kind of still evolving. But yeah, I mean.
Okay.
Bids are coming in pretty high on a lot of things from what I hear.
One question I would have for him, if you don't mind, would be increasing the load limit back up. What could you tell them about? Because what would be your opinion on the increased nature of that needed maintenance if you go back to 40-ton loads? How much acceleration is there going to be in maintenance activities because now you go back to the load rate? And is that going to drive something to where in 2 years or so we're back down because we've accelerated the impact and the degradation of the bridge because we go back to a higher load rating? I guess, what's your thought?
The primary one would be the deck welding is probably was the primary beneficiary. Now, it might also still be a beneficiary from the reduced speed, and your guardrail will definitely benefit from the reduced speed. That should help quite a bit with because once one of those trucks hits into the guardrail, he's usually oversteering back into the guardrail to avoid hitting an oncoming car and tears up, 100 feet or so, or, and I know 3 years or so ago, we replaced a bunch of posts and tube rails and connections.
We just had a truck hit the guardrail right up into it, blew the front right tire, and then broke the axle
Oh, was stuck on the bridge.
on the bridge.
Wow. It took a while to get them cleared, didn't it? Oh. So, I mean,
So do you think ODOT would approve raising the limit back up, and how long would it take for them to make that decision?
I believe they would. I mean, we need to finish the revised things. We need to verify plates and document those to kind of solidify this new change. Submit them the draft, put the package together. We've got pretty much all of the calculations together and everything to submit for their review and comment. And now that we don't need any additional repairs, then it's just a matter of them accepting the supplemental load rating to then restore back to the loads of these legal trucks. So you're not changing a lot necessarily. I think now your type 3 trucks limited to 32 tons. That could go back to 40. It doesn't have to. I mean, if you decided you want to keep them lower, you can. I think there was a bit of discussion with the stakeholders or communities of the trucking industry, some of the fruit haulers and others that that certainly are interested in being able to.
Have you ever been involved in seasonal load rate increase? So we identified harvest 3 months, say the winter months, there's not a lot of traffic or as large traffic, we eliminate that 40 ton. Lower it down, along the life, and then we identify certain times of the year that we allow this for economic development and capitalism still continues.
Certainly your prerogative as the bridge owner.
Practical to me that we identify, and if it is a problem, like Mike's saying, deterioration is accelerated. If we can minimize, 6 months of heavy use versus 12 months of heavy use. Might be better off.
Yeah. I have not been involved with that because typically a highway bridge, whatever, it's just, it's posted and they leave it,
Really
but
hard to
you're a privately owned bridge, you can set the terms on it. That's your
I think
That's your
it's a
prerogative.
Discussion we're gonna
Yeah.
have to have, is it worth? There's
Yeah.
pros and cons on both sides that we've got to consider.
Yeah.
So financially, where are you in the work, in your work package? How much more money are you gonna spend to get us to the point where we could give the report to ODOT for final review, approval, or whatever?
Not much more. Our sub has, they're done. And I think we've submitted their last invoice. We still have a little bit in there. I don't expect we will spend the rest of ours because I mean, we're well over what we budgeted for the analysis part, but way on most of the budget was in more design and for rehabs that won't be necessary. And so we'll definitely underspend on that. So I don't think I don't have a ballpark estimate, probably a few thousand remaining
So
just to get it closed out
Yeah,
and coordinate with
appreciate that. So
ODOT.
my last kind of question for you is, with the fracture critical report that we just got last month ago or 2
Yeah.
months, there's a whole bunch of items, work items in there. None of those work items are required to be able to lift the weight limit back up.
No.
ODOT's fine.
Nope. And we'll go over that, and that's the next
Okay.
topic, and kind of go over what those items are.
Can I ask a quick question? So as you're doing your upgrade, your supplemental work. And if the commission were to either change the load rating and or the speed, would that instantly change the sufficiency rating?
No.
Okay.
These legal truck ratings don't have a bearing on the sufficiency rating. The HL 93 design load, that inventory rating would, which we didn't analyze for that truck because never going to get that above 1. If the goal was to raise the sufficiency rating, we could add that truck in and, well,
That was right.
we would need to get BDI to do additional work to analyze that truck across all the different spans and elements of the bridge to get a rating, an inventory rating number for that truck. That's part of the equation that's in the sufficiency rating. And so that might raise it back up. That's what tanked it when the load rating was issued. The inventory rating went down. It's currently at that was on the cover. I think it's 11.4, and it was some number higher than that. I don't remember what it used to be, but that brought the sufficiency rating when it dropped from like 38 to 16, I think was it. I'm
Yeah,
gonna give you that
38 to 16.
list. That was as a result of the load rating. And I think that was predominantly, if not all, related to that change of that one number.
What do you think caused it to go from 16 to 6?
The change of the substructure. Well, I don't know that the substructure change actually reduced the. Oh, yeah, the substructure went from a 5 to a 4. And then the channel condition, but I'm not sure the channel condition affected it, but that was one of the. The other things, they lowered the channel condition from, it was either a 7 or a 6 to a 4. And that
I
was,
understand that the underwater really hasn't changed much in the last several reports. Is it because at the 38 and the 16, that underwater report wasn't fully recognized
Yeah.
in the calculation? That's what I guess.
yeah, so Joel Booth, who kind of oversees the inspection program at ODOT, have been pushing the consultant that they weren't taking into account the underwater inspection report to his satisfaction.
Okay,
And so. Okay, so then the other item, if you want to go to the other one, is the result of the inspection report. And this exhibit basically showing the kind of all of the elements and kind of where they're located throughout the bridge. So there's quite a few of them. So the bubble notes, one, they're stringer to floor beam connections, the shim plates or the bolts to them. We just repaired a bunch of these last spring. Well, there's 16 locations.
what causing them to walk out?
Well, I think a bunch of the bolts were sheared off. John, anyway, I think because last summer you got up to 117 degrees out there. And so we think some of those are, but I think some of these are also ones that we repaired just in the spring. So now maybe that was, we had some pretty high heat this summer as well. So I'm not
I
sure.
still don't understand how they could walk off unless the bridge is moving, and vibrating,
Well, if
And-
the
it's lifting off and moving out.
the stringers are expanding and they shear off the bolt. And now what happens is the stringer may be sitting up. Like some of the photos show, there's not a bolt kind of holding it there. The stringer might be not bearing on that shim plate, and then it can just vibrate out of place. And so while they're not tightened down tight, because otherwise it would, push somewhere else to expand. It's supposed to expand at one end. But if they're sitting up there floating, then it's gonna kind of be bouncing every time a truck goes over it. And usually gets noisy. You hear that slapping or something's pounding, and that leads to other bad things. Usually, so
Okay.
we don't
But
like.
my point is, a heavier truck going at speed is gonna cause this to go even more, which those plates are gonna start walking even more if everything else was equal.
More or less, I mean, potentially. A lot of it, I think, is probably in the vibration. Once the truck's going over and hits on it, well, then it closes the gap and touches and moves on. It's hard to say. There's so much traffic on the bridge. It's kind of, you've got vibrations going all the time. And so not all of these are missing bolts. The ones that are missing bolts usually also have a shim plate that's either moved or it's in the process or will move. I know last time, it's funny, sometimes these shim plates, they're there for 2 years. It's sitting right next to the beam. It still hasn't come off or moved. And which kills me because I would think the thing would vibrate off and drop in the river. And I think most of them were there when we replaced them last time. It just had to be put over and put a bolt back in it. And so I think we need to look at adding 2 bolts at the end of the connection, if only one's being used. We
The other
might,
thing I noticed in there is that a number of the flanges are wearing away, rust. They're getting thinner, either moving. I saw a number of pictures there where bottom flange of some kind of a member is degrading quickly. a lot of rust on the bridge. To me, it looks like we've kind of lost a lot of the paint. Or paint
Yeah,
protection.
Paint conditions, not very good shape. Corrosion is not too severe yet. I mean, but you've got areas where there's active corrosion for sure. The worst spots usually happen at joints where you get pack rest between members, gusset plate and the members, or back-to-back angles. Those tend to be amazed at how much a bulge in those angles pack rust can make, you know, between rivet points. It can move.
So what do we need to do to contain this thing, your work list coming off this fracture critical? What do we need to spend?
So for this repair, I've got 2 projects identified out of these, all the red bullets. And then the bottom blue and number 9, which is just cleaning and patching some cracks in the tops of the pier caps. Based off the study we did last year of that. I think all of that is on the range of $200,000. Nearly half of that is just access for like renting a underbridge inspection truck so they can get out there and get around underneath. That's going to be an option for the contractor, but I know one of the past projects we did, that was the way they chose to do it. It was the best way for them to get out there rather than trying to build scaffolding underneath. But they're expensive to rent, and so it's a pretty high level estimate. But most of this work is really pretty minor stuff. It's just access, being able to get to it. So I kind of would expect 1 to 2 weeks of nighttime bridge closures. It's really probably 8 to 10 days. But depending on whether they work weekends or not. And so given our recent experience with trying to do any work on the bridge under flagging conditions, it's just not realistic. So the nighttime closures is way better for the contractor. He's got full access to get out and do whatever he needs, wherever he needs it. And it's a lot less impactful on the traffic.
Do they use drones for underbridge inspection?
They do. They do. Nothing can really quite compare the human eye. It's just like photographs. They can give you a lot of information, and they can also be very misleading. And you can't really tell, is that a crack in the steel, crack in the paint from a drone? But they're using them more and more, and they're getting better with the technology and things. So. Yeah, especially on a bridge like this where the access is difficult.
So what's the next step? Or would you be developing a work package to?
Yes. So the other project is doing the patching on Pier 6 and 8, the underwater work. And so that is probably going to be around 300,000 or so. Yeah, that's very ballparkish. In one of the exhibits in your package, I included the original report and the sketches of the piers and kind of boxed out the areas that I think would need to be patched. And there was a couple of photos in there that showed a sort of a sample of what they did at the Burnside Bridge. And so they anchor on some steel plates and pressure pump grout into those voids.
How about the crack in the foundation over on the Washington side? Are you looking to do something with that?
Really not very concerned about it, but good. I mean, it's again, that's another thing that hasn't changed in a long time, but it's not something that gives me too much concern.
It might be good for you all to hear about the paint. Just a little more on what you're gonna be seeing over the next few years on that. And I don't know if Mark wants to just high level talk about it, but that's gonna be a huge item that's gonna be coming
Yeah,
out
so-
that
Being a little bit more pointed, when do you see that we need to have a real paint program, which is gonna be sandblasting and then recoating
Yeah, that's more of the point is just the process that it will be to paint that bridge.
Yeah, and that's several multi-million dollar projects.
If you had to make a recommendation, where would you go first and roughly the scope of it and when? Can we push this thing another 8 years before we have to get into a paint program, or are we gonna have to do something much?
Probably a lot of the just exposed members that have failed paint and some surface corrosion are not going to rapidly decline. You have a kind of a self-cleaning bridge because you got a lot of good wind and it's fairly open. The places that are a problem are places where debris accumulates, which isn't too many, but there's a couple spots on this bridge that inspectors have been commenting about cleaning and we haven't got out there. I know John was trying to get some, and I think we got some of it addressed when we did those last stringer repairs. I'm not sure, but at each end where the concrete decks come onto the grid deck, all the stuff comes off the tires and gets deposited on members. And they've got photos in the inspection report that's showing several inches of stuff piled up. Those are the spots that will just eat away steel because they stay wet. And they don't get, you know, when you get wet and then you dry out, you don't degrade that much. You get into areas where you stay shaded or you stay moist, you have material in there, you can degrade rapidly.
So
So those areas need to
those are
be,
the areas that we ought to really focus in early. Clean them
Yeah.
up, sandblast them, recoat them, repaint those spots.
Yeah.
Not
Getting-
gonna look real pretty, but you're not looking for pretty. you're
getting
looking for
those
tight.
areas cleaned up. Places where there's pack rust developing. You basically can get in there with needle guns. And other small type of equipment where you're not having to bag the bridge to do it. Just containment is a big part of paint cost. So you can do some of those things on a lower level. And you don't have to worry about getting everything taken care of perfectly. You're trying to arrest the active corrosion and to seal it up to minimize its continuation. Now, if you were looking to maintain the bridge for a long period of time, then you would need to get in and do a full abrasive blast, repainting and replace members that have degradation.
So if we wanted an inventory of those areas, do we have enough information on the fracture critical report to be able to say, here are the areas that we've got to go after?
You have enough for a good place to start. But it's the kind of thing that you really need to either send inspectors back out to verify the locations and the criteria of where to be. Paint projects can really balloon on you. There's a lot of paint contractors that are very good with the change order pad. And depending on how you define the limits, the area of the limit of what they're to do. And that's hard to do off of just an inspection report. But it identifies the locations to go out and inspect and verify. So it's kind of what we're wanting to do when we have the inspectors come out to verify those splice plates in span 3, but also to verify these other locations and things. So we put a bid package together. We know the extents and the limits and the locations have been confirmed.
Do we need to give direction that when they do that, to go ahead and scope those particular areas that have pack rust that we really need to go blast, clean, and then repaint? We need to do that at the same time and
That I would suggest would be a separate inspection. I've got some people that potentially identified that could be really looking at a 1 day thing, and I'm trying to get them on short notice. that's something I would want to schedule out a little further in advance so that we could get a
I'm
team
just
for,
thinking.
couple of
we've already
days.
Got them here. We're paying a mob, we're paying a demob. Does it make sense? We're trying to keep the cost down here too.
yeah, but that's a lot bigger inspection task. There's
Okay.
19 truss bands to cover a lot of joints on. So, I mean, that, we're looking at more like a week's worth of inspection.
Well, it sounds like this ought to go on your list to put on the things to do.
Gotcha, so.
Yeah.
So that would be the third priority, so you've got two priorities in your packet. This would be a third one.
I think that's.
Yeah, and that's something we can definitely schedule ahead and we can put together, start looking through reports, identifying the primary areas that need, and then do an inspection for those
Yeah, we're
locations.
quickly running out of good weather. If we wanted to try and paint this thing this year, we're very quickly running out, or it's not gonna happen. And I don't think you wanna be painting over the winter time.
Yeah, I don't. When I was asking about availability for inspectors, like they're pretty booked through the end of the year. And so I was like, I need to get a couple people out here for a day. And so.
Okay.
I getting that in this fall might be pretty difficult.
Thank you, Mark.
So,
Appreciate it.
anyway, but I think it's definitely something we should look at.
So is that?
Scheduling to do.
Is that an action item?
I think so.
The consensus for that third item to do inspection on the rust areas and paint areas?
Yeah.
Oh, an inspection with the intent of coming up with a
Schedule.
work package.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, we would identify the locations to be inspected. And then have this confirmed.
Perfect, okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or? Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
On to the executive director report, Mr. Greenwood.
Thank you. Not a whole lot to mention other than what's already in the report. I did want to call out that we do have one packet for the legal services RFP. I did spend some time today contacting municipalities in the Dalles and Cascade blocks to get some more ideas for people to apply. And so I called maybe 6 to 8 different firms and actually talked to 2 or 3 and did get feedback that there is another firm out there that will be submitting a proposal. So that deadline is a week from today. So we should have at least 2. So so that's an update there. And then regarding the finance director recruitment, that deadline is October 30th. And so far, the headhunter has only received 3 applications. So if you recall, when the city went out for their finance director position, I think they ended up with 8. So it's just been very slow moving on these finance director recruitments. So we're certainly looking forward to reviewing those and making sure and hoping that they're a high quality batch. But that is the update on those items. Unless there's any specific questions in the report.
Any commissioner committee reports? There, I know that there wasn't a urban renewal. So nothing, no report.
I've got one for the Pacific Northwest Waterway Association. Myself and Mike there attended the meeting this last week. A couple of observations that maybe we want to think about. The Port of Vancouver, again in Washington, used a program called tax increment area. to help fund revenue stream in this one section that they were trying to restore and refurbish. There's a tax base, but and I don't know exactly where it went, but they use this tax increment area to overlay a relatively small section. And any property that was developed there, they got a little adder for their property tax and taxes and so on that went directly to the port to help pay for the restoration. They put in a whole new dock area, a lot of undergrounds. Really looks nice. It's really a nice area. I don't know if we can use that in Oregon, but it was kind of an interesting concept that I hadn't heard about before. And the way I looked at it, could we use something like a tax increment area over the port area down here to be able to grab some property tax back into the port? And maybe do something like that up around the airport. I'm just looking for different streams of revenue.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's legal. I don't know if Oregon has such a thing. But it was kind of an interesting concept that I thought, hey, let's bring it back here.
We'll have something for you, at your next meeting, actually, we're having a study on tax increment financing for the lot one development right now. And we'll have a study for that for you.
Okay.
Great.
There's a couple other items here. There, item number 2, there was a discussion from EPA. There's some grants for the Columbia River Basin, and it's actually used to reduce toxins, not only in the river, but through the watershed. And I was kind of thinking, could we use that to help pay for the new bridge stormwater collection? Something that maybe we can bring to the bi-state and we'll look at that. And we've got contact names for all of these people. The other one that was really interesting, I think, for us in the port, there was a great discussion on the river cruise industry on the Columbia. It's growing rapidly. Every year it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's more ships coming in. I believe they said that there was 5 ships that are targeted for the Columbia River, Snake River operation. It's going to be, it is a huge industry. It's going to get bigger here. There was a town, Kalama, Washington, that is kind of the gateway to Mount St. Helens. And American Cruise Line would take their riverboat and run the bow up onto the sandbar. And people would climb off the bow, walk across the sand, step over a railroad track to get to the bus to take them up to St. Helens, and they bring them back and do the same thing. Well, this little community said, wow, that's really stupid. And that we're not getting any revenue off of those boats. They just leave, come back, leave. So they made a partnership with American Cruise Line, and together they built a pier and a dock out into the water. It's nothing fancy, but it's effective. So it gets the people onto the shore much easier and quicker and safer. But then the whole shoreline was developed. And there's McMinon's built a restaurant right there. And they're getting ready to build a second one on the opposite side. So they're they've got them from both directions. And the whole little area down there is really developed with a lot of taste. It looks nice. And then I look at what we've got out here, which I think is absolutely terrible. Where they come into our little jetty here, and the buses come in, they come right off the boat onto the bus, the back of the bus is up, and off they go up to Wham and other places. I think there's just an opportunity that we're missing with this whole cruise line thing. that, and I've got names of people that are willing to come talk to us and form a partnership to develop something, not just for the cruise line, but have things for these people to do up through the valley. And we've got a lot of stuff. We just got to tap into it. So I kind of think we ought to have a working group, working session. When we're talking to Chamber, we're talking to Park and Rec, we're talking to the port, we're talking to WAM, we're talking up on the mountain, Timberline Log or someplace. I think there's an opportunity here that we're not taking advantage of.
Well, Mike, I think our roundtable is an ideal place for that.
Yep.
I get a line item, add it to it, it's under waterfront that we actually address those issues. We can brainstorm. It's a good suggestion.
Great call.
And then the last one I've got here, actually two more. There's an Inflation Reduction Act, so there's new Fed clean energy incentives for ports and marine industries. And it's funded somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 billion to fund new bridge. Could we use it to fund our new bridge, solar, wind generation of some type? I've got the name of the guy that was given the talk, but there may be something there that we can go after. We'll go after anything to get a few more bucks here and there. And then lastly, we had an interesting briefing on the I-5 bridge. The guy's name is Frank Green, who is the project administrator for the I-5. Gave quite a talk. Couple of takeaways from it. That project is a mega project on any scale. Our little project here is 0.01 compared to that thing. Their estimate is somewhere between 2.8 and $4 million, or $4 billion. When I looked at it, it's not only the bridge across the river, it's light rail across the river for both sides. Savvy Island, now with the bridge going higher, you can't have an off ramp and an on ramp to Savvy Island to get up to the bridge. You just can't get up there fast enough. So the conceptual design is to have another bridge that will address Savvy Island. And it has quite a slope to get up to the north to get back onto the I-5. Then going north of I-5, there's like 5 different exits, interchanges that are all going to have to be redone. So my thought is that it's not a $4 billion project, it's a $10 billion project. And you're probably talking 20 years. When I take a look at the Boston Artery project versus our project versus their project, ours is way over here. Boston Artery is way over here. I-5 is 3/4 away. So it's going to be a magnificent project when it's done. And I told them, if I was 20 years younger, I'd love to go work on it. But it's going to be a nightmare for citizens during construction. It's going to be a real mess, but it's going to be really cool when it's done. But we're talking about years. They're starting basically over with their environmental impact statement and study. So for the next 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to be tied up with that. Then they go into design. We could actually have our bridge done before they start doing anything in the river. And we need to try and grab those funds for that period of time to use on ours. Anyway, it was kind of eye-opening and very interesting.
Great. Thank you much.
Yep.
Anyone else? If not, we'll go into action items. Heather, you missed it. We already did action item A. Okay. Because it was time sensitive. And so we can go to action item B, Mr. Greenwood.
Yes, so in your packet is the first amendment to the HNTP Owners Representation Contract. The additions in this amendment revolve around the completion of the project delivery analysis, the geotechnical boring analysis that Mike was referencing earlier. It also includes the preliminary engineering leading up to an RFP for design and construction. And then increasing Mike and Brian to full-time. So in a lot of ways, what we're doing is we're trying to accelerate work from the prior years. But really, it's also an opportunity to make sure that we're putting the hours that are necessary to get all of this work done. Commissioner Fox was very involved in the negotiations with HNTV and with ARA. So we would get the proposal from HNTV, then Mike and I would meet with ARA, who's our third-party reviewer. And so we did about 3 rounds there.
Yeah, so kind of summarizing, Arup did basically a fair price estimate of the scope of work.
Yeah.
In the state of Oregon, which is something new to me, on the engineering type of a contract, which is what HNTV is, the overhead rates are fixed and approved by the state of Oregon. You don't get to vote. Even if you think they're really high, you don't get to vote, it's approved. Okay, so the really moving part in all of this is how many hours is it going to take to execute a chunk of work? In that regards, when we gave the scope of work to AREP, as well as HNTV, the hours were incredibly close. It was very close. It was 2%, I think, 2% off out of almost 9,000 hours. So that gave me some real confidence that, okay, we've got that. When you take a look at using the overhead rates, the other piece of it is the wage rate that the overheads applied to. And when you take a look at the wage rate difference on the table, but the 2 tables I saw, one was at $164 an hour and the other one was at $162 an hour on the average. That's pretty close. You're not going to get any closer than that in 2 different companies. So that gave me a lot of confidence that, okay, that piece of it is reasonable. The only other major piece was the geotech contract. And HNTB was a little bit higher than AREP. But we did a little quickie analysis of some numbers we had from a previous contractor from WSP, and we're in the ballpark. Even the 2 differences weren't that far off. And the key thing is, this is not a lump sum contract. We're going to pay for whatever work we ask for. So if the estimate was $500 and it actually cost $450, we're going to pay $450. If it was $500 and it goes to $550, there's some areas that we can move around, but if we need additional authorized funds, got to come back here to get them. So with that, I feel very comfortable in suggesting that we authorize
You
this.
want to note that the bi-state work group will also.
Yes. We took it to the bi-state yesterday afternoon and had a good talk about that, and there was consensus to bring it to you folks with a recommendation of approval.
So that's that's staff's recommendation as well.
Okay, can I get a motion or any questions from anyone?
Make a motion to approve amendment number 1 to contract with HNTB for consulting services related to bridge replacement.
A second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair Isaac.
Great, thank you.
Okay, action item C, request for development interest. Mr. Hadley.
Good evening, commissioners. In continuing effort to look for ways to seek additional revenue sources at the airport, consultants. Staff has developed a request for developer interest for the North Apron. As you know, the North Apron was recently completed. We have 2 shovel-ready sites. We looked at capitalizing our own construction, and this was right in the cusp of the tail end, I guess, of COVID. And it didn't pencil out. It wasn't a smart move at that point. So staff has developed this request for developer interest, thinking it would give us a little insight into the market reaction. One thing of note is it doesn't obligate us to move forward with any such applicants, but it would give us a better indication of how much interest it still exists for development of commercial hangars out here.
Legal counsel has a comment regarding this. We didn't have a chance to review it super closely or check in with Greg about this, but one comment is that in the RFDI, draft RFDI, it doesn't say anything about being compliant with FAA requirements, which maybe just some suggested language of adding that in, just because it is right there. And also that it would be the only way that this type of arrangement would be reasonable is and compliant with public contracting laws is if it is a long-term ground lease, which is, you do mention that it's a ground lease kind of a situation. But I just, I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to chat with you before to check in with that.
So subject to legal review. There you go.
Thank you.
Counsel.
Okay, any questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve issuance of a request for developer interest for the North Apron at the Kengerston Airfield pending legal review.
Second motion.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair, I pass.
Thank you.
All right,
The next item I have, I'm sorry.
no, go for it.
It's still talked about the airport's last session. The commission approved the acceptance of the FAA grant to their CIP program for the AWAS relocation, specifically the Windsock. This is the task order from PAE, who will start to do the design phase of this project.
You feel it's a reasonable number?
I do. I mean, it was vetted. It's something that's, and again, this is not our, it's a reimbursement. So there's a 90-10 split. So for the 84,000 and change, our 10%, and then we still have other grant programs to reduce that. So when it comes to the number, I would trust the professional engineers that deal in the aviation industry over my individual assumptions.
Make sure you get the location right this time.
Yeah, it is a safety concern for the glider club and for other aircraft, and so it is an important project.
Did you speak to them all in regard to identifying smoke or technology?
I have not with that particular one.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's why I make sure it's upgradable and also if it has potential with the new technology to identify smoke that it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is exactly in this design phase. It's perfect time to.
Greg, I'm not, I don't mean to drill you or. I've got a lot of respect for what you're doing and so on. I caution you just a little bit, the way you responded to that last question. We all are. We're responsible to the public for any money that we spend, even if it's a grant. We still have to treat it like it's our own money and watch out for it. I would suggest that when you have estimates like this, and especially when it gets bigger than this, you have some means to justify in your own mind that you've got a reasonable deal. I don't know how to do that in your world. But we can't just say, well, it's not a problem. We're only putting in 10% of this. We're okay. That's not part of our role. Our role is to really watch how we spend money for the public. And it's actually your taxpayer money, my taxpayer money that we're spending. So I just caution you how you address that. And if you need to have a way, because you've got a bunch of these coming, that you need to be able to do a fair price estimate, then maybe you need to work with Kevin and find such a vehicle to allow you to do that.
There are mechanisms, if the price was a little further north, but considering even in from my perspective of architectural design fees, that doesn't seem like it's
Okay.
that out of the realm. So when I think about engineering costs to design it, I don't have, specific knowledge of what those engineering prices generally are, but it didn't seem like it was out of the realm of rational costs. And then again, with the understanding that the grant program, our out of pocket is not going to be as significant as that. It's going to be a huge benefit to the airport.
I'm
No,
concerned
it's
about the figure.
Not necessary to
Because we pay for the grant. We pay for the grant out of our taxes.
yeah, that's correct.
So it's kind of, yeah, the
Enough said, I don't mean to embarrass you, I'm not trying to.
I just also appreciate it.
It's out of concern.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, can I get a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve task order 2, decision approach 1, design bidding. Service for a wash replacement project. Airport not to exceed 84,650.
Second,
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair, aye. Okay, now we're on a commission call. Heather, I'll start with you. Anything to report?
No,
No?
I met with Greg. Few days ago to talk about the airport. We just talked about how we can keep continuing to push forward and we have a couple good things going here, so.
What's your thoughts?
I would just suggest to all of us that we start thinking about the November planning day. And maybe jot down a couple of ideas you've got to give it to the port, so. And when we get into that day, we're looking at the stuff we want to look at.
For that, yeah.
Yeah, if there's any materials that you want us to have prepared, just send an email to me and I'll make sure that staff sees that if they're responsible for the material. So just shoot an email to me, I'll make sure we follow up on that.
Okay, Commissioner Straight?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the board, if it's okay if we ask staff to go back in and pull out our policy in regard to service payment. We get paid monthly. I'd like to revisit that and have maybe restructure it so you get paid for a meeting you may miss. A good example, you two are 6 hours down here Tuesday or Monday. And if you missed tonight's meeting, you wouldn't get paid. I don't think that's fair. We put a lot of hours in. We're not down here for the money, but to take any money that we should be getting, because the amount of hours, we all lose money being up here out of our own pocket. So I'd like to have staff bring it back to us, put it in our packet for next meeting. We can look at it and maybe massage it, restructure it. So we get paid for our service, not for our meeting attendance.
I did not know that.
It's frustrating. Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. Anyone have a
Yeah.
thoughts about?
Also, like Mike talks about the next meeting coming up, roundtable meeting. I'd kind of like to touch on a little bit as far as when we have our roundtable, there's part of me that kind of wants to identify certain areas, like marina, airport, waterfront, new development. And I would kind of want port to be, or the staff be thinking about including the board more. And let's use Gregor, for example, that maybe Greg's got a problem at the airport or situation, contacts Heather and I, we come in for an hour with him. So now you got two commissioners on board with the program going forward. So when the meeting is held, Greg knows he has 2 votes already, and now we only need one more vote to move the motion forward. I think it's easier for Heather and I to explain to you two our position because we're elected officials. They're 9 to 5, or 8 to 5. So I think it'd be helpful if we maybe during that roundtable, we just think about dividing up and having the staff utilize our connections and our knowledge in the community to move things forward. So
But if I could tail on to that for just a minute for this meeting. I would really like to see this meeting in two sections. Section one, which is a period of time to set the vision. And what do we, and the vision is, what do we want to be when we grow up by this time, that time, that time? Okay, and that vision then helps drive us in each of these work centers or profit centers to help us define what we want to go do. But it puts it into context up here.
Would it be helpful to have, because I'm assuming that you're gonna have some ideas that come out of there that staff will go back and kind of assess as far as which of these, if you might have 20 really good ideas. We'll evaluate them and next meeting kind of put them in some kind of order for you to consider. Would you like to see at the beginning of that session some criteria that staff would then be evaluating your ideas from, so that we kind of know how to score those?
Yeah, I think in this, I hate the word strategy, but this upper
Yeah.
session, the vision. I think that would be helpful of putting together some criteria for you
And then
to
also,
prioritize work.
we can build on it as a board,
Sure.
we can build on those criteria and say, hey, we kind of want to massage out a little bit, or maybe a little more aggressive in that department. But
You found that document that Ann produced a few years ago that he was after that.
Yeah, that's a strategy.
So you can start with those criteria as a starting point. And then there's, you don't want to, it's going to be something that staff as management team can just review and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 3, we managed to do it just with your experts here.
And I'd encourage, I guess, speak from the board too, is that we want staff to be very vocal. We want staff to be aggressive and think outside the box, not just us. We're here to help you guys, vice versa. So I think I speak for everybody that we want you guys to be aggressive.
Absolutely.
If we're coming out of the wrong mindset, let us know that. It doesn't.
Do you want us to provide like some lists of ideas of our own, or?
Sure.
I
I
have
think
no
it'd be
problem with
great.
that. It's a round table. It's just. a thing.
But I think if we have that information beforehand, it will help. We can submit some brainstorming ideas, they can submit some brainstorming ideas, we can get those in our hands beforehand, so we can think about them.
Yeah.
I think it'll really open up a lot of.
And I think there's a lot of dialogue and it makes us feel like a community. We get input.
And the other thing with that is nothing sacred. So wide open. Just because we didn't do it in the last 10 years doesn't mean we're not going to do it in the next 10 years. So, and frankly, I wouldn't worry about zoning. I wouldn't worry about any precursor stuff. We got to talk about it as maybe an impediment to making something happen, but we understand that's a roadblock. We got to do something.
That's a good point. Because Kevin and I spoke earlier about that too. And, Kevin said, no, this is probably at the right time to have Dustin come down and talk about planning, zoning stuff. You're absolutely right. I think it's time for us to identify, and then maybe the next meeting we have those people in the room with us and say, can we do this? Is there any chance that we get a variance for this and have in the room, but we're all on the same page and that list is a little shorter. Yeah.
I would change the term just a little tiny bit. Instead of can we do this, it's how can we do this?
Sounds good. Wordsmithing 101.
Great, but that sounds doable, and so we'll work and come up with some ideas and share some criteria as well.
Great. Okay, and I don't have anything to add, except, good job for everyone's involvement last Friday, that was a lot of stuff, so. No.
Yeah. I can't reach it, but.
Okay, so then any confirmation or for commission directives to staff, I think addressing the November meeting.
Yeah, we had to add paint inspection, scope of work and bid package to identify and confirm the paint project on the bridge. We had to add a cruise industry working group discussion to analyze opportunities with cruise industry. The November planning meeting agenda preparation and looked at our financial policy that governs commission compensation.
I think there's one more, and that is, can we use a tax increment area approach on the board? Well, it's kind of a further definition of what it is, and is it something that we can use?
Okay, and then with that, I will recess our regular session and we will enter into executive session under ORS 192.6602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real estate and property transactions.